universally across all of the PMOs, is this move from having generic support. You know, what do you do in the PMO? Well, we just support projects and programs. What does that mean? Well, anything we want it to mean. To actually starting to think about having a defined list of services. Okay, so the picture I've got here is for somebody who's a better mother than me. You know, the kids come home and say, can I have something to eat? You toddle off into the kitchen, you kind of use whatever skills, read whatever recipe book needs, and kind of cook whatever's required at usually whatever time of the day or night it is that your kids are hungry and you want to kind of feed them. Oh, fathers, sorry, I forget. I do it from my perspective, yes? So, whereas if you go out to into a restaurant, what do you get in front of you? A menu, yes? So one who always goes a little bit off menu, but what does having a menu mean for the actual restaurant? What do they do in terms of? So they can do some planning. What do you mean by organisation?
Timing, well, still planning.
Well, yeah, well, we have opening hours for a start, don't we? Yes, so we can talk about kind of what our opening hours are going to be.
And they are able to kind of curtail the demand of the
ingredients.
Not ingredients, but the requests. You know,
Okay.
You come into the restaurant and they have a menu. You can go beyond the menu.
Okay, so yes, so we know the list of things that we're going to be asked for, and the kind of the follow-on from that is actually means that we can have a much more limited larder in terms of what we purchase, and we recognise that we can go with the seasonality when things are available, which allows us then to manage the costs of some of the things that we're selling. And knowing our market about what people are prepared to pay, you know, there are certain parts in England where, you know, going out for a £250 meal, yes, probably not a thing in the centre of London. You can probably find a number of places where that happens. So knowing your market and what people are prepared to pay. Now, if anybody's watched MasterChef or any of those programmes, you will also know that in the kitchen what they do is they allocate chefs out. So today you are in charge of beans on toast, and today you're in charge of salmon and scrambled eggs. So they allocate out particular meals to individual kind of chefs who then either develop their skills or actually use the skills that they've got to best effect in the kitchen. And so we can take that same analogy to the PMO, is that we're starting to see much more service-driven PMOs where we have a list of services, so we can make sure that we have the tools and the processes and the templates in place to support those services, but also that we can identify the skills required and make sure we have them available to deliver the services from our PMO. And it's an interesting kind of conversation when you start getting asked to do things in your PMO and you have to say, well, actually, we haven't got any kind of spare resource, so which of these services would you like us to stop doing to replace them with these other services? It's not just continually adding. So I think this has been a real kind of shift in thinking from PMOs and how they service their customers. I think it's also worth saying that to get to this position and to be able to kind of offer services requires what the kind of the table on the left talked about, is actually doing some stakeholder engagement to understand what the services are that are out there, but also a level of credibility within your organisation that they kind of trust you to deliver services. And actually, it's an interesting play in terms of who gets to the final decision on which services are actually provided. We'll kind of talk a bit about that in our next slide. And it really is, it's been interesting to kind of see how the kind of what PMOs have been allowed to do, which is always an interesting phrase, isn't it? What we've been allowed to do in the organisation. One of the challenges we sometimes find is people who work in PMOs. I've yet to find somebody who works in a PMO who's really not passionate about what they do. We tend to be a kind of a passionate type of people in the PMO, which is why we're there. And there's lots of times you go in organisations and are desperate to do lots of things that you've kind of done in previous organisations and can see that the organisation needs, but we're limited not by our imagination but by their imagination and their trust and their kind of their kind of view about what we're capable of. And so we should never underestimate the amount of work it takes to actually do that stakeholder engagement, to get us into a position where we can have a conversation with the people who are actually going to use our services. And some people actually don't even recognise that they can be a customer of the PMO because they assume it's just project and programme managers. But actually we've got the opportunity to kind of to help the organisation on a much wider scale. So rise of projects supported by the rise of the PMO, and this move away from kind of just generic support to actually having some kind of menu driven, service driven service into the organisation.